We welcome you back to this channel. In this video, we will explore horror stories in museums, where a night guard faces a ghostly figure in a historic museum, a curator receives cursed paintings, and a witchcraft museum manager unleashes a malevolent entity. Go ahead, turn off the lights, and let's take one more step into the world of the unknown.
The Silent Watcher.
My name is Jack, and for the past 5 years, I've been the night watchman at a historic museum in the city center. My shift started at 10 p.m. and ended at 6 a.m. Initially, the job seemed ideal. Few distractions, time to myself, and the chance to enjoy the museum's tranquility. However, what initially seemed like a simple and relaxing job soon turned into an experience I will never forget. The museum is an old building, a 19th century mansion converted into a space to house artifacts and artworks from different eras. Its long, dark hallways, adorned with paintings and sculptures, gave it an almost solemn but also eerie atmosphere. My job was to patrol the different rooms, ensure everything was in order, and make sure the alarms were activated. One night, while making my usual rounds, something caught my attention in one of the antiquities rooms. A cold breeze swept through the room, despite me having ensured that all the windows were closed. The lights flickered slightly, and a chill ran down my spine. I tried to ignore it and continue my patrol, but I felt a strange presence, as if someone was watching me. That same night, while reviewing the security cameras, I noticed something disturbing. In the corner of the screen, a dark, blurry figure moved slowly between the display cases. I tried to focus the image better, but the figure vanished before I could make out any features. I thought it might have been a technical glitch, so I decided to forget about it and continue my shift. But over time, things got worse. Every night, the dark figure appeared in different rooms of the museum. It slipped between the shadows, always out of my reach. I began to hear inaudible whispers and light footsteps when I knew I was alone. My anxiety grew, and fear started to take hold of me. One night, while patrolling the medieval art room, I saw something that left me paralyzed. A tall, thin figure wrapped from head to toe in a dark cloak stood next to one of the suits of armor on display. Its face was hidden, but I felt its piercing gaze fixed on me. I couldn't move. My body was frozen with terror. Finally, the figure spoke, its voice a chilling whisper that resonated in my ears. "Your time here is coming to an end," it said. Before I could react, the figure vanished, leaving me alone in the darkness. Trembling, I ran to the security room and reviewed the cameras, but found no trace of the figure. The following days were tormenting. I couldn't sleep, couldn't concentrate. The nights at the museum turned into an endless nightmare. Finally, one night, I decided to confront whatever was haunting the museum. Armed with a flashlight and my determination, I walked through each room, calling out to the entity that tormented me. I entered one of the antiquities rooms and the temperature dropped sharply. The figure appeared again, this time closer, more defined. I could see its face, a pale, disfigured visage with hollow, empty eyes. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, trying to keep my composure. The figure raised a skeletal hand and pointed to one of the display cases. Inside, an ancient amulet glowed with an unnatural light. I understood then that the spirit was tied to that object, trapped between the world of the living and the dead. "Return me to my eternal rest," the figure whispered before disappearing once more. I took the amulet and, following my instinct, brought it to the museum's backyard, where I buried it under an old oak tree. As I did so, I felt a liberating presence, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. From that night on, the apparitions ceased, and the museum returned to its peaceful normality. I resigned shortly after. Although the spirit seemed to have found peace, I could not continue working there. The nights in the museum left an indelible mark on my mind, and even today, when I pass by the building, I feel a chill run down my spine. I don't know what other stories that place holds, but I know I don't want to find out.
shadows on the canvas.
For over 20 years, I have been the curator of the Contemporary Art Museum in my city. My job is my passion. I have seen thousands of works, some of unparalleled beauty, others simply curious. However, none had affected me as much as the recent anonymous donation we received a few months ago. On a cold autumn night, in the middle of a storm, the museum received a series of paintings without a sender, which seemed strange from the start. I opened the boxes with difficulty, and upon seeing their contents, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The paintings were disturbing, depicting scenes of horror and despair that seemed to be drawn from the darkest depths of the human soul. I decided it was best to examine them thoroughly before exposing them to the public. Each painting had a quality that was difficult to describe. The dark colors, the deep shadows, and the strange figures seemed to come to life. There was something in those images that I couldn't stop looking at, an almost hypnotic attraction that made me forget time. I wasn't the only one who felt it. Some of my colleagues also approached to observe them, and soon I noticed their behaviors started to change. Emma, the chief restorer, had always been a cheerful and sociable woman. After spending hours in front of one of the paintings, she began to behave strangely. She became withdrawn, almost paranoid. I caught her several times murmuring to herself, as if conversing with someone who wasn't there. One afternoon, I found her crying in front of the painting, her eyes fixed on a particularly macabre figure that seemed to be looking directly at her. Soon, other staff members began to exhibit similar behaviors. Mike, the security guard, who had always been a rational and pragmatic person, confessed to me that he had started having strange visions. He described shadows moving in the corners of his vision, inaudible whispers, and a constant feeling of being watched that left him uneasy. His account reminded me of one particular night when, staying late at work, I swore I saw a figure moving through the shadows in the exhibition hall. My own mental state also began to deteriorate. I had horrible nightmares every night, always the same scenes. I was trapped in the paintings, surrounded by the horrendous figures that seemed to come to life around me. During the day, I began to hear voices whispering my name, calling me from the paintings. I decided to investigate the origin of these paintings more thoroughly. The back of each one had an inscription in Latin, which I managed to translate with the help of an old book from the museum's library. The inscriptions spoke of trapped souls, of an ancient curse. I began to suspect that the paintings contained something more than oil and canvas, something malevolent that was affecting everyone who looked at them for too long. One night, driven by desperation and fear, I decided to burn one of the paintings, hoping to break the curse. I took it to the museum's basement, away from everyone's view, and lit a fire. However, when the flames began to devour the canvas, I heard screams. They were screams of true horror and agony, as if the souls trapped in the painting were being released. Frightened, I put out the fire and returned the painting, now partially burned, to its place. The next day, Emma did not show up for work. They found her in her apartment, catatonic, staring at the wall, murmuring incoherently. Mike resigned without notice, leaving a cryptic note saying that he couldn't stand the voices. Finally, I decided that the best course of action was to seal the paintings in the museum's storage, away from any curious eyes. I built a special room, with reinforced doors and locks, ensuring no one could enter. However, I could still feel their presence, as if the paintings were calling me, whispering my name from behind the walls. Despite having hidden them away, I can't help but feel that something has stayed with me, something that cannot be locked up. The nightmares continue, and sometimes, in the stillness of the night, I can still hear those whispers calling me from the other side of the museum. I don't know how much longer I can resist before I completely lose my mind and become forever trapped in the horror of those cursed paintings.
The Book of Evil.
My name is Emily, and a few months ago I got a night shift job as a manager in a museum that had gained some fame in the city. This museum was known for housing a unique collection dedicated to the history of the occult and witchcraft. Among its most notable pieces was an ancient book, bound in dark leather and covered in strange symbols. It was said that this book contained rituals capable of summoning beings from other dimensions, but I always thought they were just legends. One night, a fierce storm hit the city. The thunder echoed like war drums, and the rain pounded the windows with uncontrolled fury. There was a group of late visitors in the museum, a couple of college students and a pair of tourists, all of them fascinated by the mysteries the place offered. While they toured the exhibits, I was performing my usual duties, making sure everything was in order. I reached the room where the book was kept. I had always felt drawn to it, as if an invisible force pushed me to approach. That night, my curiosity was stronger than my prudence. The book was protected by a glass case, but the key was in my possession. I took the key and, with trembling hands, opened the case. I felt a chill run down my spine as I touched the book's cover. When I opened it, I found yellowed pages filled with symbols and texts in a language I didn't recognize. One of the students approached and jokingly suggested we try reading one of the rituals aloud. I laughed nervously and, without thinking much, began to pronounce the words written on one of the pages. At first nothing happened, but suddenly an especially loud thunder shook the building and the lights flickered. The atmosphere changed immediately. The air became dense and oppressive. A sense of impending danger overcame me. I tried to close the book, but it seemed as if something was keeping it open. The students also felt the change and began to back away, while the tourist couple, unaware of what was happening, continued exploring another room. Suddenly, the lights went out completely, leaving the museum in darkness. I heard a whisper behind me, a murmur I couldn't identify. My heart was pounding and fear took hold of me. I felt a presence, something I couldn't see but knew was there, watching me. In the absolute silence, the blood-curdling scream of one of the students was heard. I ran towards the sound and found him lying on the floor, eyes wide open. It seemed as if something had drained all his energy in an instant. The tourist couple appeared then, pale and trembling, trying to understand what was happening. A shadow slid through the corridor, moving unnaturally as if it was not bound by physical laws. It had a vaguely human form, but its limbs were elongated and its eyes glowed with a red light. It was the embodiment of evil, a force that had been unleashed by my recklessness. We grouped together in a desperate attempt to protect ourselves, but the entity had no intention of stopping, and we began to run. One by one, my companions fell behind, their screams of terror echoing off the museum walls. I tried to find an exit, but all the doors seemed locked and the windows were unbreakable. Finally, I found myself back in the book room. In an act of desperation, I grabbed it and began to recite the words backward, hoping to reverse the ritual. The shadow lunged at me, its red eyes full of hate. I felt its cold claws on my skin, but I kept reciting, my voice barely a whisper amid the chaos. A lightning bolt lit up the room, and for a brief moment the shadow vanished. I fell to the floor, exhausted. The lights flickered back on. The museum was silent, only broken by the sound of the rain outside. The next day, when my coworkers arrived, they found the museum in ruins and me, curled up in a corner, clutching the book as if my life depended on it. At some point, the visitors had fled, and after that, the museum closed its doors indefinitely. I never spoke of what happened that night again. The book was stored in a safe place, and I quit my job. Sometimes, on stormy nights, I feel that presence again, and I know the malevolent force is still there, waiting for its chance to return.
Thank you for journeying with us through the dark passages of these stories. If you enjoyed them, give us a like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss more tales of terror. Until next time, where fear will once again be your companion.